With the constant stream of news, reports, analysis, it really feels like a full-time job just trying to keep up.
It's overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, let alone trying to figure out what actually matters, the sheer volume.
Well, that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. It's really crafted for you, the listener.
Right.
Our mission is to, cut through all that noise, pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the surprising facts maybe from recent political and economic reports.
Think of it like your shortcut.
Exactly, your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
Absolutely. And we've gathered quite a stack of sources for today. The latest election news, some political analysis, and also a detailed breakdown of the recent inflation report. We've tried to distill it all down.
Yeah, the goal is clarity and engaging delivery and, respecting your time, balancing summaries with those details that actually stick with you.
So with that laid out, where are we kicking off this deep dive today?
Let's start in Arizona, specifically with the special election primary in Arizona's 7th Congressional District, AZ07.
Okay, this just happened yesterday, actually. It was held to replace the late Representative Raúl Grijalva, a Democrat.
Okay. That sounds pretty local on the surface. Is there a broader significance we should be looking at?
Well, yeah, it might seem local, but this primary gives us a really fascinating window into political dynamics and specific patterns you often see play out in these kinds of special elections. It's a bit of a classic example, you could say, of how certain factors shape the outcome.
Gotcha. And the Democratic results, they were pretty decisive, weren't they? Adelita Grijalva, I saw, with most reporting in, got 31,389 votes. That's like 62.3%.
A huge chunk, yeah.
Yeah.
Then Deja Fox was next with about 10,200 votes, 20.3%. And Daniel Hernandez had around 7,400, so 14.7%.
And I understand this is a D plus 13 district.
That's right, D plus 13, which basically means it leans heavily Democratic. So the Democratic primary, that's really the main event there. It usually decides who ultimately gets the seat.
And Adelita Grijalva, she's 54, Raúl Grijalva's daughter, pretty progressive. Her campaign was largely focused on being anti-Trump.
Right.
Then you had Deja Fox, who's only 25, also very progressive, but her campaign theme was more anti-establishment.
Including the Democratic establishment.
Yeah, including the Democratic establishment itself. So what seems to have happened is a split in that progressive, maybe call it the Bernie vote, between Adelita Grijalva, who's progressive and Latina, and Fox.
Right.
And that split kind of allowed Grijalva to consolidate support from moderates, centrists, maybe name recognition too, leading to that, 40-plus point win.
That is a significant victory. What about the Republican primary, then?
Over on the Republican side, Daniel Gutierrez won. He got 8,734 votes, about 59.3%. Jorge Rivas was second with roughly 3,800, 25.9%. And Jimmy Rodriguez got just under 2,200, so 14.8%.
And Gutierrez's platform, what was he focused on?
It was pretty distinct, really centered on two main things. First, combating fentanyl, which is a huge issue, obviously very pervasive. And second, railing against government overreach. He particularly focused on the federal court system, arguing it can kind of unjustly trap people without much hope.
Interesting focus. So if you boil it down, what's the key takeaway, the strategic pattern this primary shows us?
I think the core insight, and you see this again and again in special elections like this one, is that they really strongly favor relatives of the candidate being replaced.
Like a spouse or a kid.
Exactly. Spouse, kid, sibling. Because the timelines are so tight and the electorate tends to be, well, pretty politically engaged, some might say wonky voters, often gravitate towards that familiar name.
That makes sense.
We've seen it before. Think about Representative Debbie Dingell in Michigan. Democrat. She stepped right into the seat her husband, John Dingell, held for so long. It's a powerful legacy effect, gives a huge advantage.
That pattern definitely tracks, especially with the compressed nature of these races.
Okay,
let's pivot a bit. Another arena where power is being contested fiercely, Texas. And Donald Trump's involvement in their congressional map redrawing plans. His approach seems to be, if a little bit of a good thing is good, a lot of a good thing must be much better.
Yeah, this is definitely a high-stakes move, not just for the 2026 House elections, but you also have to think about potential investigations down the line if Democrats manage to retake the House. It's aggressive.
And Trump's goal is, ambitious isn't quite the word, he's pushing for 5 additional Republican seats.
That's the target, yeah. Taking the current Texas delegation, 25 Republicans, 13 Democrats, and trying to turn it into a really dominant 30 Republicans, 8 Democrats.
Wow. And just for context, Texas voters are roughly, 55% Republican, 45% Democrat?
Something like that, yes. So aiming for 30 out of 38 seats is well, it's a stretch based on the overall vote share.
So where do they start? What are the obvious targets for this kind of gerrymandering?
Well, the most obvious initial targets are districts like Henry Queller's TX28, that one leans R+2, and Vicente Gonzalez's TX34, which is basically an even district.
Right. They both had pretty narrow wins last time.
Exactly. Kimmel won by just over 13,000 votes, Gonzalez by just over 5,000. So those are definitely seen as the most vulnerable seats.
Okay, but how are they trying to justify pushing for more than just those two? What's the legal angle here?
This is where it gets interesting. According to the analysis we looked at, the argument relies on treating the Department of Justice almost like Trump's personal law firm.
Okay.
With figures like Pam Bondi, who the sources, maybe a bit wryly, call Attorney General in this context, playing a key role. They apparently sent a letter advising that 4 specific Democratic districts are supposedly illegal racial gerrymanders and have to be redrawn.
Which districts are those?
Let's see. TX09, which is D+24, TX18, D+21, TX29, D+12, and TX33, D+19, all heavily Democratic, heavily minority districts.
Wait a minute. Is that a serious legal argument? Didn't Texas just argue their maps were colorblind when they were challenged before?
That's precisely the point the sources make. It's seen as absolutely not a serious legal argument. The weakness is glaring. Texas just argued, when defending their current maps against claims they hurt minority voters, that the process was entirely colorblind. You can't really credibly argue race wasn't considered, and then immediately claim Republican officials knowingly drew maps discriminating against white people, which is sort of the implication needed to attack the Dem districts. It's a direct contradiction.
So if the legal argument is that shaky, what's the actual strategy? What are they trying to achieve?
The core strategy seems pretty transparent, actually. It's likely about redrawing the maps in a way they know probably won't hold up in court long term.
Okay.
But by using the Voting Rights Act as a kind of excuse, the goal is to knock out Democrats representing these heavily minority districts specifically for the 2026 cycle. They're basically betting the legal challenges will just take too long to resolve before that election happens.
But that sounds incredibly risky for the Texas GOP itself. What are the potential downsides?
Oh, huge risks. Several big ones. First, the courts could fast-track lawsuits. If Texas loses quickly, you get massive headlines about suppressing minority voters, especially Latinos. That's a PR nightmare.
Yeah, after.
Second, even if the state legislature goes along with it, they still have to draw new maps. And they're facing huge uncertainties. Like, how permanent is this supposed Latino swing towards the GOP? We don't really know.
Good point.
And how much has the population shifted since the last census? That data is almost 5 years old now. Plus, what kind of election will 2026 be? A blue wave? A red trickle? Nothing. They'd need to make incredibly precise guesses with almost no room for error.
So if you had to distill that risk, what's the core vulnerability for Trump's team here?
I think the insight is that the sheer audacity of the goal grabbing those 5 seats is exactly what makes it so fragile.
Right.
They're banking on legal delays, but the chance of a PR disaster, alienating parts of their own base, it risks becoming what's called a Dummymander.
Ah, the Dummymander. That's when you gerrymander so aggressively you actually end up losing seats you might have otherwise kept, right?
Exactly. Named for obvious reasons. So yeah, they risk losing seats instead of gaining them.
So with all those risks hanging over them, what are the actual options for the Texas legislature now? What could happen?
Well, they seem to have 3 basic paths. 1, they could just refuse to take on this risk. Tell Trump, tell Governor Abbott, nope, not doing it.
Okay.
2, they could sort of play along, but secretly hope the courts step in quickly and fix it before the election, taking the heat off them.
Plausible deniability.
Kind of. Or 3, they could fully play along, cross their fingers, hope the courts stay quiet, and just pray it all works out for them on Election Day, November 3rd, 2026. Each path has pretty significant consequences.
Okay, from those strategic power plays in Texas, let's shift gears again. Another really high-stakes political situation, one that just keeps making headlines, and not just for, the salacious details, but for legitimate reasons, too. The Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
Right. It's causing real conflict within Magier world, and it definitely has potential midterm implications.
It's fascinating how certain people can act as, what do you call them, bellwethers?
Yeah, exactly. Bellwethers, people whose actions or statements kind of signal bigger shifts happening under the surface.
Like how certain endorsements maybe helped Biden after his early debate stumbles.
Precisely. And in this Epstein situation, our sources point to similar canaries in a coal mine, so to speak.
Okay, who are these key bellwethers we should watch regarding Epstein?
The analysis highlights three main figures: Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana,
Yep.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, and Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina.
Why them specifically?
Well, Johnson and Thune are critical because they essentially set the congressional agenda. They decide what gets voted on, like, say, subpoenaing the Epstein files. And all three, but especially Johnson and Graham, have generally been seen as pretty loyal to Trump. So if one or more of them starts to publicly shift their stance on this, it's a strong sign that pressure from the base and maybe other Republicans is really mounting.
And it sounds like we might already be seeing some maybe subtle cracks with Speaker Johnson.
It seems that way. Johnson did an interview recently with a right-wing podcaster, and he talked about wanting transparency. He said something like, we should put everything out there and let the people decide it. Now, he also said he had confidence in Trump and Pam Bondi, but the part that really seemed to resonate, apparently even with Trump himself, was Johnson seeming to break from that nothing to see here line.
And we saw that pressure reflected in the House itself recently, didn't we?
Yeah.
There was that vote on Ro Khanna's amendment.
Yes, the Democrat from California. His amendment to a crypto bill basically requiring the administration to release all the Epstein files.
And it was incredibly close. What was it, 215 to 217 against?
Yeah, super close. And adding even more pressure now, Representative Thomas Massie.
The Republican from Kentucky, often critical of Trump.
That's him. He's preparing his own resolution. It's what's called a discharge petition.
How does that work?
It's a procedural move. If he can get 218 members, just a simple majority, to sign on to his petition, it forces a floor vote on the resolution, completely bypassing Speaker Johnson. Doesn't matter what Johnson wants.
So he'd need all 212 Democrats and just, what, 6 Republicans to sign on?
Just 5 Republicans now, actually, given recent shifts. But yes, that's the math. It could force a vote.
Wow. This really highlights the Republican dilemma here, doesn't it?
It's crystal clear. The exact same voters who are incredibly loyal to Trump are also often deeply invested in all the Epstein conspiracy theories.
Right.
So every single time a Republican votes against making these files public, they're just handing ammunition to their opponents for the next election.
How so?
Well, primary challengers will hammer them, accuse them of being part of some deep state conspiracy, and then in the general election, opponents will argue they're protecting Donald Trump at the expense of justice.
That's a tough spot.
It really is. It suggests, and this is what the source observes, that maybe the political harm from defying Trump on this might actually be less now than the harm from sticking with him.
That's a significant shift in calculation.
Huge. Steve Bannon himself apparently estimated that if this isn't handled right, maybe 10% of Republican voters could just stay home next election day. And that, he figured, could cost the GOP 40 or more House seats.
40 seats! That's massive. So, okay, let's play this out as a thought exercise. If the current strategy of just ignoring it isn't working, what options might Trump have to deal with this, according to the analysis?
Well, the source lays out a few kind of creative writing scenarios, you could say. Option 1, give the base what it wants, part 1.
Meaning?
Then maybe create some documents, fake ones, presumably implicating figures the base loves to hate, like the Clintons or Anthony Weiner.
But wouldn't that be incredibly risky? Defamation lawsuits.
Exactly the problem. Trump knows this firsthand from the E. Jean Carroll cases, right? Roberta Kaplan won huge judgments against him.
$5 million, then $83 million.
Yeah, so to avoid suing living people, the source kind of darkly jokes maybe implicate a deceased Republican, and they land on Rush Limbaugh as the most obvious choice.
Rush Limbaugh. Why him?
Well, he's dead, so he can't sue. He was a Trump ally. He had a somewhat controversial past himself, and maybe, the thinking goes, he could believably take a posthumous bullet for the team.
That is definitely a political thriller kind of scenario. Okay, what's give the base what it wants, part 2?
That involves delivering some kind of carefully worded, really vague, conspiratorial-sounding explanation, maybe on a friendly right-wing show like Tucker Carlson's.
Okay.
The idea would be to just imply the information is being held back for, certain opportunities. Let the base keep believing the Democrats are evil, Trump's playing 4D chess, and they are in on some special secret knowledge.
Keep the mystery alive.
Right.
What else?
Option 3. The classic, bury him in paperwork.
Just dump massive amounts of documents.
Right. Produce millions of pages, maybe pad it with unrelated stuff, totally mundane things, maybe even some fake stuff mixed in. It might satisfy that hunger for something and let the conspiracy theorists find hidden meaning wherever they look.
Okay. Another option.
Hmm.
Find a scapegoat.
That seems like maybe Trump's initial instinct, yeah. Sacrificing someone, perhaps like Pam Bondi.
But what's the problem there?
The problem, as the source points out, is it's really hard to explain why the files still can't be released after you've supposedly gotten rid of the person blocking them.
Right.
Richard Nixon could probably tell you how well that tends to work out in the end, doesn't usually solve the underlying problem.
And the final option mentioned, appointing a special counsel.
Hmm.
I think Lauren Boebert suggested Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, that was floated. But the optics, I mean...
Having an accused sex trafficker investigate an accused sex trafficker.
It's not great. And it's unlikely to actually satisfy the base or change anyone's mind. We saw that when even hardcore May fans turned on people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino just for supporting a DOJ memo saying there wasn't some big conspiracy.
It sounds very Nixonian again.
Exactly. It feels like a playbook straight out of Nixon's later years where every attempt to control the narrative just seemed to backfire and dig the hole deeper.
So wrapping up this Epstein section, what's the bottom line for Trump here?
It really looks like Trump and his administration have backed themselves into a very difficult, increasingly Nixonian corner. And while things often seem to just go away for Trump, this situation might be different.
Yeah.
It might actually require some really risky, maybe even illegal actions to resolve, or perhaps more likely just kicking the can down the road again and hoping it somehow disappears. But the pressure seems to be building this time.
Okay. Let's shift gears completely now. Away from the political maneuvering and scandals, let's talk about the latest economic news, specifically the June inflation breakdown. What does this mean for your household budget?
Yeah, a really key insight here, maybe a surprising one, is that inflation actually accelerated last month. It picked up speed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we're starting to see some tangible signs that all the global trade turmoil, especially the impact of tariffs, is beginning to take a measurable toll on consumer prices.
Okay, so what are the numbers? The Consumer Price Index, the CPI.
It rose 2.7% over the prior year in June. Now, that's an uptick from May, which was 2.4%. So, yeah, it's moving in the wrong direction, accelerating slightly.
And where are we seeing those price increases specifically? What categories moved?
Well, looking inside the numbers, we saw prices for things like airfares and also new and used cars. Those actually slowed down a bit.
Okay.
But other categories like coffee, meat, medical care, and especially shelter costs, rent, housing, those continued to march higher. And that's what pushed the overall index up.
You mentioned tariffs. Are we seeing clear, definite signs of their impact yet? Or is it still speculative?
The analysis calls it scattered signs, but they seem to be getting clearer. Bloomberg's senior editor, Chris Yancey, he specifically pointed out that household furnishings, think furniture, were up 1% just in the month of June.
1% in a month.
Yeah, which he noted was the biggest monthly gain since January 2022, back when inflation was really surging. And he explicitly linked that to tariff effects starting to bite.
Interesting. Any other categories?
Yeah, other areas often impacted by tariffs like recreation, apparel, appliances. Those also ticked a bit higher in June, so the signs are there, even if scattered.
Okay. Now, what about food prices? That's always front and center for people's budgets.
Food price hikes are definitely continuing, yeah. Overall, groceries were up 0.3% in June, which was the same as May's increase. Annually, groceries are up 2.4%.
And what about Uggs? They were the poster child for inflation for a while.
Right. Eggs, well, their prices actually slowed down quite a bit from May, dropping 7.4%. But they're still a steep 27.4% higher than they were a year ago.
Wow. So still way up year over year. Do we have an average cost?
Yeah, the average for a dozen large grade A eggs was $3.78 in June. That's down from $4.55 in May, which is good. But compared to a year ago, when the average was $2.72, still much higher.
Okay. And meat prices?
Still elevated, especially beef. Ground beef is nearly 10% higher than a year ago. That averaged $6.10 per pound in June. Steaks are up even more, 12.4%.
Ouch. Anything stable.
Seafood and poultry prices, interestingly, held relatively stable in June compared to the month before.
And eating out, that cost keeps climbing too, right?
It does. Costs for eating out grew 0.4% just from May to June, and they were 3.8% higher than a year ago. So that trend continues upward as well.
Woo. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground today. Really bounced around.
We really have.
From, the micro level insights you get from a single special election to the huge strategic power plays of gerrymandering,
Then diving deep into the Epstein scandal and its political fallout.
and finally landing on these macro level economic trends, the inflation numbers that hit your wallet directly.
And our aim, like always, is just to give you that deeper understanding, maybe spark a few aha moments, help you feel truly well-informed without needing to sift through, hundreds of articles yourself.
Precisely. And maybe leave you with something to think about. As you consider all these complexities we talked about, the mechanics of gerrymandering, how districts get drawn to consolidate power,
Or the public's really insistent demand for transparency when it comes to these major scandals.
or even just the nuances of how global economics shift prices at your local store,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder, what responsibility do we have? As informed citizens, how do we best discern the actual truth from what might just be calculated political strategy?
It's a big question.
It is. Definitely something worth mulling over in a world where information is everywhere, but also constantly contested.